Okay, so now that we've gone over the basic components of a particle system, let's look in a little more detail how the actual events work with the particle system. So more specifically, the kind of p-type event flow that's really the kind of key to creating complex particle effects. So what happens is we have our p-type in our scene that's being emitted, and that p-type can trigger an event. Now, it can be a specialized form of an event, like in a collision event, or a bit more generalized. There's a lot of different kinds of events that we can select. And just really quickly, let's take a look at just making a simple event. So what we can do is select the cloud and then inspect that, and we have the p-type listed here, and we have an events tab. So through the events tab, we can specify a new event. Now that new event has been created, and we can inspect it. So what an event is basically something that has a trigger and that will cause another action to occur. So we can make that trigger be a multitude of different things. Currently it's set to particle age percentage. So at the defaults, what it's saying is that 100% of the particle age, we want the particles to disappear. And that's actually what's happening. As they reach their full age, they disappear. If we set this to, say, 50% of their age, you'll see as they travel half as far, and at 50% of their life, they end up disappearing. So the different triggers we can use are, every n particles, every n frames. We can specify collision here. So what we're doing when we actually go modify environment set obstacle, we're essentially just creating a collision event where we're specifying the trigger as a collision with an object, and the action we want to do is bounce. And that's all a collision really is with particles. So in this case right now, what we want to do is emit more particles. So what we want to say is that 50% of the age, we want to emit more particles. So let's play that back. And you can see nothing has happened because in order to actually emit particles, we need to define an emission property. So much like on the grid where we have this emission property, we need to apply an emission property to the actual event. So we can actually create that here through the source emission option. So we create an event emission. So now you can see the particles are going quite a bit longer. And because we're using the same p-type, it's not easy to tell what's happening. But essentially, at 50% of the particle life, we're emitting new particles. So we're effectively getting the particles to travel further because new ones are being emitted at half the original one's life. So what we've done, if we go back to our chart here, we've defined an event. Now we've defined an emission property. And that emission property, because we haven't created a new p-type, is going and releasing more of the original p-type. So we've got this kind of loop done. What we want to do is say we want to have the original p-type release another p-type. So for example, in a practical situation, this could be a fire at 50% of its life. We want it to release smoke. So we go back here. What we can do is edit that emission property. And then from the actual emission property page, we can specify a new p-type. So currently we only have one, so it's using that same p-type. What we can do is say new p-type. Now it's using a new p-type. We want to edit that new p-type. And then right here in the overview, let's just so you can visually see the difference, let's make it a different color, slightly different size. So there you go. That becomes a little more clear. Now we're just staying on the conceptual level, so it doesn't look so great, but you can see this being as you'll define this kind of fire effect, and then at a certain point you want that to turn into smoke, so you define another p-type at a certain age of the fire. So what we're essentially doing is going through this loop now. So we've defined the event, we've defined the emission property, and we've defined a new p-type. And now from that p-type we could define a new event, a new emission property, and so on and so on. So you can basically, end up creating this chain of different p-types, one after another, with different triggers and different actions. And that's essentially how you end up creating large particle kind of effects, is through these events and different p-types. So that just conceptually is a look at how the events work. If we want to create something a little more specialized, just to add one more layer, what I can do is select the cloud and go into the actual p-type here, and let's define a new event for that. So we define a new event for the red particles now. We want to inspect that item. Now if I go in here and we want to say at 100% of its age, we want to emit more particles again. And what we need to do to actually have that work is create an emission event. So now this might look a bit confusing, but what's happening is very kind of understandable, because we've created a new emission event. So what's happening is at 100% of its age, the red one is now emitting the original p-type. So p-type is being emitted, and that original p-type had an event defined at 50% of its life to emit p-type 2. So you're seeing this yellow going back to red, and that's pretty normal. If we want, we can define a collision. So let's just add a grid in here. Translate that up here. So what we can say, instead of the trigger being age, let's define that as a collision. And instead of an emission, what we want to do is trigger a bounce. So we're going to need to bring this guy down further to actually get it to work. So what we want to do is pick our actual obstacle. And there you go. We've defined a collision event. And you can see the particles are bouncing against it. So in this case, we've gone and defined a collision event. That creates an obstacle property on our object. So if we actually look in Explorer under our object, we have this grid obstacle property defined. So that becomes part of the actual simulation and gets evaluated by the particle operator. So that's just kind of an overview of how the events work with particles.